Welcome to Uncomfortable, conversations about culture and Christianity. My name is Eric, and today I'm joined by Jess.
Hello, world.
And Alex.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, everybody. You didn't limit your greeting to just one person. That's good.
I want everybody.
It's very inclusive of you. How are you guys doing? Everybody doing okay? Doing all right?
Doing good.
Today, this episode kind of marks the beginning of a 3-part series we're doing before we take our little summer break for July. But we're calling this series The Faces of Addiction. And Alex, I believe that the thought behind this was kind of sparked by something that happened back in January. Was it?
Yeah, in January, I was watching a video from a country music star. His name is Jelly Roll. He was before the Senate just talking about fentanyl and the opioid crisis that we have in our country. So it really hit me, as I was listening to that, and as someone who's probably talk about it later, had some family members with some addiction and to opioids. And so it just got me thinking about, hey, this is an important topic. He brings it up in that kind of way. And so something I don't think we get talked about a lot. So I'm going to just play that clip because I think he does a better job of explaining and making maybe a case for this than I do. So we'll listen and give our thoughts.
My name is Jason D. Ford, but to most I am known as Jelly Roll. It is important to establish earlier that I am a musician and that I have no political alliance. I am neither Democrat nor Republican. In fact, because of my past, my right to vote has been restricted. Thus far, I have never paid attention to a political race in my life. Ironically, I think that makes me the perfect person to speak about this because fentanyl transcends partisanship and ideology, gentlemen and women. This is a totally different problem. At 190 people a day overdose and die every single day in the United States of America. That is about a 737 plane. That's what about a 737 aircraft can carry. Could you imagine the national media attention it would get if they were reporting that a plane was crashing every single day and killing 190 people? But because it's 190 drug addicts, we don't feel that way. Because America has been known to bully and shame drug addicts instead of dealing and trying to understand what the actual root of the problem is with that. I've attended more funerals than I care to share with y'all. This committee, I could sit here and cry for days about the caskets I've carried of people I loved dearly, deeply, in my soul, good people, not just drug addicts, uncles, friends, cousins, normal people. Some people that just got in a car wreck and started taking a pain pill to manage it. One thing led to the other. And how fast it spirals out of control, I don't think people truly understand. And I also understand the paradox of my history as a drug dealer standing in front of this committee. But equally, I think that's what makes me perfect to talk about this. I was a part of the problem. I am here now standing as a man that wants to be a part of the solution. I brought my community down. I hurt people. I was the uneducated man in the kitchen playing chemist with drugs I knew absolutely nothing about, just like these drug dealers are doing right now when they're mixing every drug on the market with fentanyl, and they're killing the people we love. I believed when I sold drugs genuinely that selling drugs was a victimless crime. I truly believe that, y'all. Now I have a 15-year-old daughter whose mother is a drug addict. Every day I get to look in the eyes of a victim in my household of the effects of drugs. Every single day. And every single day I have to wonder, if me and my wife, if today will be the day that I have to tell my daughter that her mother became a part of the national statistics. All I want to say is that I not only encourage y'all to do this, I encourage y'all to take it a step further. At every concert I perform, I witness the heartbreaking impact of fentanyl. I see fans grappling with this tragedy in the form of music that they seek solace in music and hope that their experiences won't befall others. They crave reassurance. These are the people I'm here to speak for, y'all. These people crave reassurance that their elected officials actually care more about human life than they do about ideology and partisanship. I stand here as a regular member of society. I am a stupid songwriter, y'all, but I have firsthand witnessed this in a way most people have not. I encourage y'all to not only pass this bill, but I encourage you to bring it up where it matters, at the kitchen table.
I mean, it's sobering. It's to hear those stats, to hear, to hear that firsthand perspective, and to think, maybe not even. I shouldn't even say maybe. It's something we are not taking as serious as we should as a society.
Yeah, I mean, when he said over 190 people every day die of an opioid, you know, due to opioid overdose and addiction. And he made that comparison that that'd be like a 747 going down every day, and us not talking about it. And so, it is sobering, especially to hear him. I think, like so many things, politics get involved into it, or, you know, maybe you haven't understood it from the space that he's in as someone that was contributing and is now learning and trying to educate people from that perspective, and, you know, even sharing about his daughter and the struggles that her mom has, and just what that's like. So yeah, it's difficult.
And I also think I like how he reframed it, because I think we hear a lot of statistics, and we'll talk more about that later on in our episode, but to reframe it and put it in the mind space of, it's like a plane going down every day. And if that type of thing was happening, we would be outraged and saying what's wrong and paying attention to it. And so I think that was really helpful. And I think it's also like, when we've made it through a lot of things and we have experience and we have opinions, like, I'm glad that he came and said something. I mean, there's a lot of times where we can get wrapped up in shame or feeling a certain way. And so I have a lot of respect for somebody that's like, I've made these mistakes in the past. I can't even vote. Like, I've got nothing in the game except I care about people and making these changes. And it's just a good, even on our level, like normal people, like not celebrity level, that our stories matter and the things we've been through matter, and those details can make a difference. And so
yeah, that's good.
Love that he shared that.
So yeah, today, coming up next, we're going to be joined by Dan, and he's going to be sharing his story of loss, losing his son to addiction. And I guess I want to start by saying I really appreciate his vulnerability and coming in to do that. And it's a sensitive subject. So be sure to stay tuned for that. Today we're joined by Dan Lindstrom. Thank you for joining us. Really appreciate that. You're here to share a little bit of your story, and I'd love it if you could just introduce yourself to our listeners and let them know a little bit about you and who you are.
Well, thank you for having me, everyone. My name is Dan Lindstrom. I've been married for 45 years to my wife, Deb. We have 3 children, 7 grandchildren. I'm a Nebraska native. Grew up in northeast Nebraska on a farm, one-room schoolhouse kid. And I've been in the financial services industry for over 45 years.
Well, all right. And Dan is here to share his story, the loss of your son, to something that we talked about before we got into this conversation was what the fentanyl crisis and that what we're facing in this country. So I'm just going to read a few statistics to kind of catch people up if they aren't familiar. One of those is, according to the CDC, in 2021, over 100,000 people in the U.S. died from drug overdoses, with fentanyl being a major contributor. The National Institute on Drug Abuse reports that about 21 to 29% of patients prescribed opioids for chronic pain misuse them. And also that fentanyl is 50 to 100 times more potent than morphine. It's some of that stuff's shocking. I think people, if they are disconnected from it, they're just unaware. They're so unaware of what's going on.
Yeah. So, I mean, as you hear those, I mean, are those true statistics compared to kind of what you guys have seen and experienced as you guys have gone through your journey?
They are. In fact, I really appreciate this. When Tyler passed away, he died June 14th, 2022. So it'll be 2 years next week. We had a son that essentially was a statistic, and we had learned that roughly 100,000 individuals died that year with opioid or fentanyl. And so those numbers resonate with us, and believe that to be true.
Yeah. So just to kind of take us back into the journey and kind of maybe get to know Tyler a little bit and how this all happened. Because usually people, doesn't happen out of thin air. So maybe share the story for how Tyler became addicted to opioids.
Sure. Well, this is goes back to about 2004. It was the fall of 2003 or 2004, but I remember getting a phone call from Tyler. He was attending Baylor University, and he was a member of the football team. And he called and said, "Dad, I really got hurt today in practice. I made a hit on a running back at the goal line and hurt my back." And I'd asked him if he saw the trainer, and he said yes, and I'm scheduled to see a doctor next week. He did so, and they prescribed pain pills for that injury. And the addiction began. That was 20 years ago. And at that period of time, opioids are readily available. They were being prescribed pretty freely, and he was taking full advantage of that. Of course, at that time, we didn't know there was addiction brewing at all, but I can pinpoint it back in the fall of 2003 or 2004. I want to say 04.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, successful kid, got into college, playing college football, living the dream. So he wasn't going and looking for this.
No.
Got hurt, got prescribed something, and addiction just began from there. Which is, I think that's important to note, because I think a lot of times, people just assume, and we'll get into maybe some of the stereotypes later, but that somebody went looking for it. And a lot of times this is how it happens. Someone gets hurt and they get prescribed something. Everything's innocent at that point, and they don't really know how it's going to affect their lives. So, thanks for sharing.
A lot of times in therapy, like, I get to hear the breadth of people's stories. So thank you for sharing, because I think this is a space that we don't get to hear a lot about, the raw, the real of what's happening. So thank you for the space that you're sharing with us to be here today to talk about this, because it's something that we don't talk about a lot. But I'm just thinking about how we're going back to Tyler's story and getting injured. How did you see that evolve? Was there any warning signs or anything that you maybe caught on to that, or looking back thought, like, that's something that I, looking back, noticed, or that's...
At the time we didn't see any changes. We just didn't know there was this addiction brewing. And maybe at that time he didn't either. Later I talked to him and spoke to him about that, and quite candidly, he liked how it made him feel. He said, "Dad, when I take these opioids, I feel like somebody's putting a warm blanket around me." And his reaction was it felt good to him, right? Maybe eased the pain or gave him comfort. And we didn't see any sort of behavioral changes until a few years later. We just weren't aware of how this was escalating, and it was escalating, and we just didn't know it. After Tyler graduated from Baylor University, he went to Arizona to work with my brother, and probably about a year into that, my brother called and said, I think we've got a issue or a problem here. And he noticed some erratic behavior. I think he was pinpointing maybe pain pills. That's what he was sharing with me. But, I'm pretty naive about it. I don't know that it's as severe as it is. And when he returned from Arizona back here to Omaha, that's when we started noticing this erratic behavior, mood swings, but still didn't put our finger on it. We didn't know how severe this addiction was. I remember visiting with him in the kitchen one day, bringing it to him, his attention, and said, "Hey, listen, we're noticing your behavior," and so on. And he said, "Don't worry about it. Everything's under control." Well, it wasn't.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that.
That's one of the questions that I have is, with something like this, experiencing it firsthand, did you have maybe stereotypes to what you thought this would look like, before dealing with it so intimately, but maybe like, oh, this is what I've seen on TV, or this is what I've seen on the news, or and how did that look differently?
Yeah, that's a great question. Deb and I, this whole idea of addiction or illicit drugs, that was so foreign to us. We had not endeavored or participated in that area. So when it came to light that Tyler was battling this addiction, and I'll tell you how it really hit us right in the face. I don't recall the year. I'm at work. My wife is at home. There was a knock at the door. This was 2012. I do remember the year now. My oldest son was running for Congress. There was a knock at the door. 2 police officers showed up at the front door and delivered a warrant for Tyler's arrest. 42 counts of doctor shopping, felony. At this time, Tyler was still in Arizona. And so my wife said, he doesn't live here, he's not here. They didn't really press on her. So they left. Deb called me. I called Tyler. There's a warrant for your arrest. You need to surrender to the authorities, fly home, and turn yourself in. No way. I'm never coming back to Nebraska. They aren't going to come get me. Not going to happen. Well, little did I know, they had spoken to him roughly 4 to 8 weeks prior to that. And as I found out later, this is what motivated him to say, Dad, I think I'm going to head to Arizona, work for my brother. Well, he was getting out of town because they were starting to close in on him, right? I didn't know this at the time. So over time, I convinced him to turn himself in. He flew home and he did turn himself in. And there's some really positives that came out of that, frankly. We have what we call the drug court program here called the ARCH. I didn't know it existed. I learned a lot about this area, like it or not. So Tyler went into the ARCH program. And if you're successful into the halfway house, 3/4 house for 2 years, sobriety, you're working, they will expunge your record, seal your records. And I'll be blunt about it. No way that's going to happen. He did it. So for 2 years, he's sober. He's clean. He's living in the 3/4 house. So on Sundays, Deb and I would make our trek down to visit him. It's not a place I visioned I'd spend my Sundays, but I did. We did. And he was successful and graduated. So here he was, sober, clean for 2 years, successfully completed the ARCH program, and within a few months relapsed and began to spiral down again.
At that time, you guys probably thought, victory, like 2 years is nothing to,
Right.
We're not talking about 2 days or 2 weeks or 2 months, but 2 years is a long time to really be clean. And you think, okay, that 2 years is behind you. You've got all that. And I'm curious, what kind of empathy did just having a son go through this, even probably being and visiting, that type of place?
Right.
I think most of us have images of, oh, this is what addicts are, and it's this type of person, it's a junkie, it's, whatever that our tropes are that we have maybe inside of our heads. But you're going down there, you're probably meeting other people that are a part of his friend groups.
We are. In fact, he befriended a gentleman, I won't share his name on the podcast, but they became very close. And his name is Mike. And Mike said, Tyler, what are you doing here? You grew up with a loving mother and father. you graduate high school, you attended a university, have your degree, right? Your bachelor's degree from a university, and you're here in the arts program battling drug addiction. You don't understand my life. I didn't have a parents. I slept on the floor of the homes, and so his story is completely different. Couldn't understand why Tyler would fall into the addiction. When Tyler died, Mike came to the house and said, Tyler's the only one that ever believed in me. He's clean. He's employed. He brought his fiance to meet us. And he said Tyler was the one that believed in him and encouraged him and turned his life around.
Wow.
And that was really, really heartwarming. In fact, I had Mike out to the house while they were in the arts program, and it was really cool to see. Tyler was very grateful, very humble. He brought his friend Mike. We had a wonderful dinner together, and Mike overcame his addiction, of course, which is wonderful. And Tyler just couldn't get beyond it. Yeah.
How did you and your wife just develop, I don't know, empathy for people in this situation, or just knowing, hey, there's sober Tyler that we love, we raised, and then there's this Tyler that's an addict and he just can't give something up, and you haven't, don't have that same addiction. You're like, this doesn't make any sense. There's no logic to why he continues to go back to it. So how did you guys develop an empathy and an ability maybe to separate between Tyler and what he was going through, sober and non-sober?
Well, it was really difficult. And so this when Deb and I initially found out that Tyler had 42 counts of doctor shopping, that he had this severe addiction, we didn't know where to turn. At first, you're embarrassed. You're ashamed. You're frustrated. What will people think? That's your first reaction to this situation. But what I found out, that I had a number of friends, unbeknownst to me, were dealing with very similar situations, whether it's a family member with alcohol addiction or whatever their addiction would be. So I reached out to them, started having dialogue with them. Deb went to some counseling to get in the mind of an addict. And so it was very difficult at times, in fact, frustrating, maddening, so to speak, that you had this bright, charming, witty. If he was sitting here right now and he was clean, we would be in stitches. He would have a nickname for you within 2 or 3 minutes of meeting you. And he was just that type of person. But the addict was a 180 to that. Verbally abusive, he verbally abused myself, Deb, his brother, his sister, trying to manipulate. When you don't have anything, all you have left is essentially anger, frustration. You're trying to manipulate someone. Yeah. And a lot of this was new to us, and it was extremely difficult time, especially the last 3 to 5 years. Incredible. Yeah. Difficult.
Yeah. How did that charm, because I remember sitting and listening to you and Deb just share some of this with me, that charm, the fact that he'd have us in stitches, all those kinds of things. How did you see that end up maybe being a part of his downfall? Because he could win anybody over, right?
He sure
could win.
could.
I mean, to be able to go doctor shopping, you have to be able to have a personality that you can manipulate. You can do a lot of those things. No one's going to just walk in if you look like you're high on something and just say, oh yeah, let's give you more. So how did that play into?
Unfortunately, I think his charm was a detriment to him, right? He was a smart young man. He thought he could figure out the system. He could use his wit, his charm to manipulate people, and obviously must have done so for a while. My oldest son served as a state senator, and I believe his first year, he met another colleague, Sarah Howard. Sarah lost a sister to a drug overdose. So those two came together and brought legislation to Nebraska. What would happen, Tyler would go to a doctor, get a prescription, go to another doctor, get a prescription, and there was no networking. No one knew that this young man was out filling multiple prescriptions. So Tyler knew that, used the system. Brett and Sarah Howard brought legislation, and it was interesting.
Wow.
Brett went to Tyler and said, Tyler, will you testify in executive committee and let us know how you use the system, how you use it? He goes, I'd be happy to. I'll tell you how I did it. Well, as it turns out, it was 49-0 unanimous on the floor that now at the state of Nebraska, these pharmacies are talking to each other so that you can't do that anymore. But at the time, of course, if you were out there shopping, you could get away with it for a while.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
I think that you, in that portion that you just shared, really painted a good picture of the emotional roller coaster that is addiction, where it's kind of revolving. It gets better and then it gets worse, and it gets worse and then it gets better. And that just makes me think about the emotional toll that it takes, even like my empathy for you as a parent, of just seeing your child go through this and wanting to help and do everything you can, and then feeling that helplessness. And then it just makes me think about how it affects our relationships. And so how was that stepping into your marriage, even with you and Deb, and how did that affect, and like, how did you manage the stress?
Difficult, I will tell you. That was a difficult time. So we weren't unified, and we had different ideas on how to handle and deal with Tyler. Okay, so you have a mother's heart that wants to help and assist, provide resources, whether it's money or housing. We would have disagreements over that. I said, Deb, we're killing him. We're just killing him slowly. And there was a point where he was living in an apartment, and of course we're paying for the apartment. And I told Deb, you need to write a letter to the apartment, and Tyler is going to leave this apartment at the end of the month. She goes, I don't know if I can do it. I said, that's okay. Either you write it or I will, because we're going to put him on the street. That was tough. I never thought I'd have to put a child on the street. She agreed. Tyler thought we were bluffing. A few days before the end of the month, I said, pack your car. He says, where will I go? I said, I really don't care where you go, but if it were me, I would take your car before you're out of gas. I would head east, and I go to the Sienna Francis house. I learned about missions as well. But the Santa Francis house is a wet house, so you can be using, and they will accept you. So I said, I would head to the Santa Francis house. They'll give you a place to sleep, and they'll feed you. I remember him driving away from the apartment. We gave all his contents to charity. He didn't go to the Sienna Francis house for the first 2 or 3 nights. He would sleep in his car in like a Home Depot or Walmart parking lot. He'd get cold at night, and my wife went to visit our daughter in California by the grace of God. I was home by myself. It was a Saturday morning. Knock at the door at 4 a.m. I know who's at that door. I didn't want to answer that door. But as I got out of bed, I said to myself, now remember, I don't want to answer this door. I know who's on the other side of this door. What would Jesus do? He would help those that deserve it the least. And believe me, at this point, he deserved it the least. I answered the door. It was Tyler. Dad, I don't feel well. Can I come in? I said, the bathroom's right there. He began to puke his guts out. I went and got a towel. I wouldn't take my eyes off him. I said, you can lay down on the living room floor. He laid there for about 3 hours, and I said, it's time for you to leave. He goes, do you mind if I go in my car and sleep outside your house? I said, I do. Get on down the road. And I'll say again, before you run out of fuel, I'd go to the Santa Francis house. They'll give you a bed and they'll feed you. He did. I got a call a week later. He says, Dad, Tyler, I'm at the Santa Francis house. It's a hellhole. Smells. People steal things. I have to fight for a cot. I have to fight for a blanket. And I have to take my shoes off at night and put it under my pillow while I sleep. Now, I just responded, okay, and we ended the conversation. Now, me personally, we had him right where we needed him, okay? A week later, I get a phone call. Dad, I've got great news. So it's great, Tyler. I got to sign my very own cotton blanket today. Just think about that a moment. In my entire life, I never thought about where I was going to lay my head or if I had a blanket. He was grateful to have a cot. He was grateful to have a blanket. These are all good things. He called a week later, and he says, Dad, I'm looking around this place, and I'm seeing people your age. I don't want to be those people. And across the street, there was, I believe, the Hope Center. He checked himself in, and he stayed a month there. And then he called me and said, hey, Pops, I'm thinking about getting my MBA. Great, Tyler. Just to remind you, I'm not paying for it. I know. He applied and was accepted and graduated with honors at Creighton and received his MBA 18 months later. Is that crazy? So he had the intellect, but he couldn't get beyond the addiction. So here's a young man that was smart, funny, but couldn't overcome the addiction. And never did, frankly.
Yeah. And I think that's important to, even you mentioned, you weren't unified all the time. And I know from my own family struggles and story that, man, it's so difficult to respond, especially when somebody has addiction, because, you've got one person that's like, multiple people will use, what will Jesus do? Some people are like, well, Jesus would tell people not sin anymore and leave them alone. And others are like, well, he would continue to help care for them. And I've seen the frustration, how it nags on a marriage, how it nags on families, because even me and my siblings, I've got a sibling that's had an opioid addiction, and we don't all agree on what is best for this person, and we all have a heart. We're all like, I want to help them, but to go through those disagreements, it causes so much more friction than I think a lot of times people talk about. And it's over the center of addiction, is at the center of it. And so I think that's super helpful and insightful, because I think sometimes people are like, oh, everybody's on the same page, or all those things. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, we weren't always on the same page, and the addiction's difficult. Not only, I don't think the addict understands the stress they put on the people that love them the most.
Yeah, no way.
I wrote Tyler many notes, told him I loved him. In fact, when he was in counseling, at times he would tell the counselor, they would say, well, tell me about your father, tell me about your mother, tell me about your childhood. He said, I have nothing to tell. My mom and dad loved me. That was really important. Tyler knew that he was loved. And, we were tough on him at times, not tough enough at times. But we got a lot of calls in the middle of the night. Dad, I'm in jail. Dad, I need money. Dad, I'm in trouble. I made it clear early on that if you are ever in jail, don't bother calling me. You can stay there. And I can't remember how many times he was in jail, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. Never once did I assist or help him get out of that situation. It was so interesting. I remember a phone call that I received. Dad, I need your help. I've got it all lined up. I just need some money. I can be bailed out. I don't know how long I'll be here. I mean, it could be 30 days. Okay. I don't care if it's 60 days. Don't call me. 3 or 4 hours later, Dad, great news. They just let me out. And I'm thinking, maybe good news for you. I don't know if it's good news long-term for you, but I have many stories about late night phone calls, 2 in the morning, 4 in the morning, jail, money, food, transportation, not knowing if he was still alive, go silent for a few days. We didn't know where he was or if he was alive. There were times where he got so abusive verbally that he would wear my wife out. You know, he knew how to use her. And so I said, well, why don't you block him? So I called him and said, Mom's going to block you. If you need anything, it's got to come through me. 30 days later, wore me out. Deb would say, let me take him now for 30 days. I'd call him. I'm blocking you. You can't reach me. If you need anything, you can talk to your mother. So it was fatigue. And it was hard to differentiate between Tyler and the addict at times, right? It was maddening. It was frustrating. He'd cry out to the Lord. He really would. What's God's plan for his life? I remember Deb many times saying, why would God allow Tyler to live this tormented life? Towards the end of his life, it was getting tougher, more difficult for all of us. And I remember wanting to know if it was okay. Could I cry out to the Lord? Is that okay? Would he accept me just to cry out to him? Those things come into your mind. And it's okay to cry out. And so it challenges your faith, it challenges your marriage, it challenges, and then we have 2 children, right? We have a son and a daughter. They're watching this play out before their eyes. They're frustrated and upset because they see what Tyler's doing to us and how that manipulation is impacting us. And so now they're not real happy. And I would say the last couple of years of Tyler's life, he had alienated everyone but Deb and I. And he would have alienated Deb and I, but we had our love as much as we didn't like him at times, and we didn't. We never gave up on God's redeeming qualities that I truly believe that Tyler would overcome this. I debated whether to share this, but I am going to share this with you. 3 years ago, I signed up for seminary. So I take seminary part-time at night and during the day. Okay, so I take seminary classes. I had a professor pose a project for us and said, class, 3,000 words, Ephesians chapter 1, verses 15 through 23. Chicago style, we'll see that paper in 4 weeks. Now, I'm one of the oldest kids in class, right? Chicago style, what did that mean? So I lifted the phone, I called the head of research library, and I said, Mr. Patterson, Dan Lindstrom, I'm a student. I need your assistance. Sure, Dan, how can I help you? I said, I have a professor that is requiring us to write a 3,000 word paper on Ephesians chapter 1, verses 15 through 23. He goes, oh, great. The spirit of wisdom and the eyes of your heart being enlightened. I know the passage. I know the professor. He's tough. How can I help you? So I shared with him that request, and he said, I am going to help you. But before I can help you, I need to know who your audience is. Sir, it's a paper for a professor. Not good enough. Tell me who you're writing this paper to. Church congregation? Let me word it a different way. Who do you know that needs to hear about the spirit of wisdom and the eyes of the heart being enlightened? Sir, I have my audience. Immediately, my audience was my son, Tyler. Tyler was a gifted writer, frankly. So I began writing this paper as Tyler's my audience. A few weeks into this project, my phone rings. I hadn't spoken to Tyler for quite a while. Hey, Pops. I said, hi, Tyler. Guess where I'm at? I don't know, Tyler. I'm at a church staring at the cross. I think I understand. You see, Tyler and I spoke a lot about Scripture, and Tyler's well-versed in the Bible. He was struggling with the resurrection and so on. I said, I understand. Next week, my phone rings again. Hey, Pops. Hi, Tyler. Guess where I'm at? Where you at, Tyler? I'm in a church staring at the cross. I think I understand. I said, remember, it all begins at the foot of the cross, Tyler. 2 weeks pass. Hey, Pops, been thinking about you. How's seminary going? He says, tough. I just finished writing a paper. I hope it's A work, but it's probably B work. He goes, really? He says, why don't you email me that paper you just finished? I'll edit it and send it back to you. I emailed it to Tyler. He read it, edited it, said, hey, Pops, lose a few of the pronouns. He died weeks after reading that paper, the paper that I wrote for him, and he never knew. Mm-hmm. And so he heard the gospel clearly in that paper. So it's interesting how God put that into play. Without a doubt, if I called him and said, hey, I want you to read this paper, he might have stiff-armed me. But isn't it interesting how the last few weeks of his life, he is staring at a cross, contemplating spiritually where he's at, what that means, and then for whatever reason, calls me out of the blue, asking about seminary. I completed a paper that he was my audience, unknown to him, and he requested to read it. Pretty amazing, isn't it?
That's powerful.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah. That's powerful. So, yeah, you've shared a lot about the ups and downs, phone calls from police and phone calls from Tyler. Can you share with us, 2 years ago almost, like what that was like, finding out addiction had finally taken his life? What was that? What were those moments like? What was just coping with that? What was all of that?
Yeah. June 14th, 4:30 p.m. My phone, I'm at the office. My phone rings. I can't grab it at the time. A couple minutes later, I was able to grab my phone, and there was a text, call me ASAP. It was from my wife, Deb. I had thought possibly her father, who maybe passed away, but I didn't think in a million years it was Tyler. So it's a sound you never want to hear of a mom wailing in agony. Oh, Dan, Tyler's dead. Come home right away. So I hung up. I called my two brothers, let them know that Tyler died. I get home, and of course, Deb's struggling, of course. And she says, well, you call the police officer. He's on the scene right now. And so I did, and he was a very professional, just a wonderful individual. And what was interesting, and maybe surprising to me, I said, what do you see? he said, we find no alcohol. We find no illicit drugs. We see some clothes on the bathroom floor, not out of line. But there's a packet open that appears to be a pill. We don't know what he died of. I mean, we don't suspect any foul play. So I spoke to the coroner, and they said he died in Austin, Texas, that Austin was just being inundated with fentanyl deaths. And so I had my suspicions. And so there's a lot of sadness here that I haven't shared. When Tyler went to the ARCH program, he had a vehicle we donated Teen Challenge. As I began to clean that out, it was riddled with used needles and syringes. My heart sunk. He lived in Chicago for a period of time. Deb and I went to visit him. Skeletal. My wife just came apart. There are so many low points in here. And sleepless nights, I just can't. Tough time. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So when you said they found the pill package, you said that was going through Austin.
Right. So I talked exactly. So they did the autopsy, and what they found out, it was he bought a pill. He thought anxiety pill, and it was laced with fentanyl. And here's a sobering fact. When Tyler played football at Baylor, he befriended a linebacker. This family loved Tyler and had him over for holiday dinners, and that family embraced him. Coincidentally, she lives in the Austin area. What an angel. When Tyler died, she learned of it. She spoke with Deb, my wife, and said, I'll take care of things here. When our good friends own a funeral home, mortuary, I'll call them. They'll treat him like their son. I will take care of everything here in the apartment. I'll box up all his possessions and send them to you. Pretty sobering. 39-year-old son. His entire possessions came in a box, small box, a hat, 3 shirts, a laptop, 3 books. But there was a manila folder in there. And as I dug in there, the night he died, he went to an ER. He went to an emergency room. Why? To manipulate the doctor for pills, whether it's opioids or anxiety pills, whatever he was looking for. I open it up and I discover the doctor's notations, what time he arrived at ER, when he left. So he got there roughly around 6 o'clock. He left about 9:40, 9:42, 9:47, something like this. The doctor refused to prescribe him any sort of medication or pills. My hunch is he got home, went to the street, bought a pill that he thought was probably an anxiety pill, and it was laced with fentanyl. And so upon the consumption of that pill, he laid right down, and they found him in his kitchen. Wow. Yeah.
So through all of this, like what would you say some of your biggest frustrations were that you faced, whether it was lack of resources to you and your wife, or maybe how people responded to it, or what?
The addict, down deep, Tyler knew he was loved. But when the addict wants something, they'll do whatever it takes to acquire that resource. And they'll take you down if you let them. Okay? There's no end to their wants. There's an end to the resources. Mm-hmm. So for those listening out there, be careful. It can be frustrating, and you may feel like they don't care. They don't. until they get what they want.
Yeah.
So they will ask and ask until you say no.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, because you're a successful guy in seminary at the time when your son dies of an addiction. You've got, just a great resume, Husker football player, all this kind of stuff. Your son, was running for office and had won and passed bills and legislation, like a lot of great things happening inside of your life. And then you've got this kind of dark, part of your life. So as you're just wrestling with that and the stigmas of what drug addiction is, and maybe the shame of like, how did I contribute to this? How am I not contributing? Like, how did those stigmas and how did you kind of wrestle between those two worlds, living in kind of both of those worlds? Like professional, I need to present myself. I need to be a strong leader. I need to do all of these types of things. And then yet I've kind of got this dark thing happening in my family. How did you just deal with those?
Alex, you described it really well, because you have your work, your marriage, you have 2 other children want your time, 7 grandchildren that want grandpa and grandma. Having a son out there, my oldest son kind of had this public life going on, and yet off to the side here, we're dealing with this really dark, I'm not saying dark individual or son, I'm talking about the dark addiction that my son had to deal with. Mm-hmm. I'm not talking about that person, but I'm talking about that addiction that complicated his life, all of our lives. So Deb and I learned, it sounds just odd, but you would, kind of compartmentalize that here. So you put it on hold, you dealt with your life, and then you came back to this. We're out to dinner with some friends. Deb's phone rings. This is sad to say. She recognized the number from jail. We're at dinner. She tilts it over to me. We have dinner with friends. We speak. We laugh. And as soon as the dinner's over, we grab the phone. We have the message. And it's a message from Tyler. I'm in jail. Help me. So here you are, as you described, living your life in these moments, and yet the sideline you're dealing with the struggles of an addict, right? In and out of jail, needing money, Uber. This is sad, but I'm going to say it. My cell phone sits on a charger next to my nightstand. For years, frequently would ring at 2, 3, or 4 in the morning. Deb and I really didn't sleep all night for years, 10. He died on June 14th. It's a Tuesday. I didn't think about it on the 14th. We went to bed on the 15th, and I looked over at my phone next to me. And for the first time, 10 years, I knew it wasn't going to ring and Tyler was going to be on the other end of that phone at 2 or 4 in the morning, needing whatever he needed. That was... it's a moment just a moment in time where I won't forget, where, because that phone has been pretty active for a long time in the middle of the night. I don't remember the last time I'd had a full night of sleep, and that night was the first time in a lot of years. And so it's fatigue. It really wears you out, dealing with that.
I'm thinking of the people that are listening now, and you've been through so much. What would you say to maybe parents that are in a similar situation? What were even like some hope or just encouragement, or what would you say to someone that's listening right now?
Jess, I really appreciate that question. It's where we were, Deb and I were, roughly 15 years ago. Where do you go? What do you do? Where do you turn? A couple of things. One, you're not alone. You're not alone. I had a number of clients that I discovered and friends that were battling the same situation or similar situation, but we don't talk about it. Mm-hmm. So you're not alone. You're going to be really upset with that addict, whether that's son, daughter, parent, friend. It's a disease. That individual's doesn't want to live this tormented life. I felt sorry for Tyler many times because he was living a life of torment. And I know that he didn't want to live that way. But I learned a lot, and I want to share a couple of takeaways, and this is going to be unvarnished, and this is going to pinch, and it's going to hurt, and you may not like what I'm going to say, okay? Deb and I wrestled on how to deal with Tyler. Resources, housing. I wanted Tyler on the street. It didn't bother me if he's in jail. Why? There's only 3 outcomes. There's only 3 of an addict. You're going to die. You're going to jail. Or you're going to be healed. You're going to overcome that addiction. That's it. 3. And by the way, going to jail isn't the worst thing. Okay? That's the facts. And you can play all the mental games you want. But your son or daughter, if unchecked, is going to die. Jail or overcome it. That's what's going to happen. That addict is going to ask you for everything, money, resources, and they'll take you down if you don't say no. You have to set boundaries. Providing too much resources, you think you're helping, you're not. You cannot work harder at it than they are, okay? Because we want to fix them. But they don't want to be fixed today. You can love them, encourage them, and guide them, but unless they want to get healthy and overcome that addiction, they won't. There's nothing you can do or say to fix them. They own the problem. They own the solution. We're guilty of that. Deb and I were guilty of that. Let's get you into rehab. He didn't want to go to rehab. By the way, when we got him into rehab, he learned how to do heroin with that group. So his opioids led to heroin. Okay? He didn't die of heroin. He died of fentanyl, thinking he bought an anxiety pill. So by providing money and resources, you think you're helping them. You're not. You're just killing them slowly. You can't fix them unless they want to be fixed. They have to buy in. You love them no matter what, but there's nothing you can do unless they want to get healthy. Yeah. And these are tough things to learn. I had a friend of mine tell me, Dan, I have one word for you: abandonment. Ooh. The hair in the back of my neck stood up. I mean, I'm to abandon my son? But what he was trying to say is, you can't fix him. He's got to want to be fixed. He's going to take all you got. If you just he'll take it. There's no end to it. There's no limits. And it appears to me that you're working harder at it than he is. So that's kind of my takeaway.
Yeah,
it's tough. Mm-hmm. Put him on the street, it's okay. Putting him in a homeless shelter, it's okay. Because he'll never rise without going down, right? You have to have pain and suffering and then you can rise out of the ash. And that's how we come to the Lord a lot of times. So be tough. It's okay. But Dan, they could die on the street. My son died. He died in an apartment that I provided for him. I don't want to hear it. Don't give me that excuse. Your son or daughter is going to die on the street or die in an apartment. My son's dead. And maybe if we had kept him on the street, or if he's in jail, he may have gotten to that point where he would have cried out, I want help, I need help. But maybe we didn't allow him to get that position, right? So be tough. Be tough. Make it hard on them. Don't make it easy on them.
Wow. Thanks, Dan. I mean, it's so much to take in and to hear. And I mean, we hear even the emotion in your voice and what you're going through. And I just, from the bottom of our hearts, I just want to say thank you for sharing, because I know it's not easy. I'm not saying I can relate, but I can empathize. And I really appreciate your time here today. It's a lot, and I think, but it's so valuable. I think we all agree that it's just people out there going through this are doing it a lot of times, like you said, in silence, and they don't have someone to turn to, or maybe they're afraid because of the stigmas or how they're going to be judged. And I also do want to just mention, if you're someone who's listening by chance going through this, an addiction or something, I mean, there's the crisis hotline you can call, which is 988. So that can get you help if you're at that place where you heard something like this and want to make that decision for yourself to get help. But yeah, thank you so much again. Do you have any closing thoughts before we wrap things up? You've shared so much. I just want to give you an opportunity to say something if you have anything there. But
I don't. Thank you for having me today. I hope it's been helpful. You don't have to agree with a lot of my comments, but they came from my heart. They came from a tough journey. Yeah. These are real life situations that Deb and I and our family had to deal with. And I'll just stop there. Yeah. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Well, thank you to all of our listeners for joining us today. If you have any questions or concerns, you can always reach out to us by sending us an email to podcast@cccomaha.org, or you can reach out to us on Instagram or TikTok at CCCOMA Podcast, or you can leave us a voicemail, call 402-885-9930. But until next time, we'll talk to you then.